Hello again, welcome inside the state capitol for another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber. I'm Rick Lord, and today we are going to be talking a little bit about health, especially when it concerns what gets put into the foods we all consume. There's a lot of talk federally with RFK Jr. now in charge of the Department of Health that he wants to watch what people are eating, watch what people are consuming, and his phrase, make America healthy again. And in that vein, here on the state level, West Virginia is soon to become the first state to pass a comprehensive reform of the food dyes that get put into food. And joining me now to talk about that is the man who introduced the bill in the House, Adam Burkhammer, delegate. First of all, just talk a little bit about the genesis of this bill, why it came about, and why you brought it to the floor, and how it might help in terms of making people healthy again.
Yeah, so I think we've got to look at West Virginia being one of the unhealthiest states in the union. We rank 50th in a lot of things, and so I began to kind of go down this rabbit hole of why is that? Because that's a burden on workforce participation, that's a burden on healthcare costs and all of those things. So what role does the government play in helping make America healthy again, or in this, making West Virginia healthy? And so one of those things that was getting some national attention and that drew my attention was the food dyes. And my wife and I had already started on what we would call an elimination diet of eliminating some certain things out of our kids' diets, and one of them was food dyes. And we had really saw some success in that. And then we had really saw even more success with a foster child that came into our care. He was really struggling with attention and hyperactivity. But we realized his diet was pretty off, and so we started down that elimination diet with him, and soon we saw a huge turnaround in his behavior, being able to focus on simple things like potty training, being able to sit at the dinner table and eat with us. All of those things really started coming to life with it. So
now, the bill would essentially ban a number of food. It's comprehensive. It's about 6 food dyes that are responsible for about 99% of the food dyes that go into the food, and in a lot of everyday items, cereals, yogurts, sports drinks.
Yeah, but what you got to look at, and where I went down it, I'm not a scientist, but I started kind of chasing those things down, and I started realizing those things had no nutritional value. They were essentially just making things appealing to the eye, making them bright. So your Fruit Loops were really bright. So in our house, we eat a different brand of Fruit Loops that is a little discolored, but tastes just as good as Fruit Loops. And so when you begin to see that there's no nutritional value, it's just simply appealing. But then when you start attaching all of those things to the neurological issues, the behavioral issues that we were seeing, as well as long-term adult issues and cancer-causing agents. And so we took the approach, we're going to ban these from food, starting, the House passed it in 27. The Senate came back, said we wanted to give our manufacturers a little more time, give them until 28, but we're looking to ban all foods that have those dyes in them.
And you brought up a point about, studies are showing that there's virtually zero nutritional value in these dyes. They're basically just chemicals that are put into food. That's an important balance, right? Because you don't want to legislate free will. You're not sitting here saying, well, you can't have your morning donuts that people want to eat. It becomes tough when you're talking about people's choices, right? Because everyone's health is different, and there are some people that might be able to eat oatmeal cream pies every day and live to 105. So at some point, you can't legislate behaviors.
I would agree with that to a certain level, but when it gets to a point that the FDA was not acting quick enough, and that they were allowing what I would call poison in our food, I felt like it was a state's job to step forward and to take care of that. We do it with tobacco, right? We say young kids can't use tobacco, smoke, or use smokeless tobacco. We say young kids can't drink alcohol because we've identified that there are health risks if you allow that to happen. And so we feel like that this rose to the level that the government should act because it wasn't necessarily adding any value to it. There are other options out there. They're being formulated all over the world that we can offer these same products on the shelves and just not have the artificial dyes, which I would consider poison in them.
And that creates another challenge because you bring up the FDA. There's been some talk about whether the FDA has been compromised by certain, people, the pharmaceutical industry, whatnot. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We could be here for years. But there comes a point where if they're not acting, like you said, you feel like it's your responsibility to. But are there any jurisdictional issues with that? And what has to happen on a federal level that would make sure that the state isn't kind of just overstepping its bounds, so to speak?
Well, first I would say there's over 20 states that are running similar legislation, some more robust, some a little less comprehensive than what we've put out. So we've kind of found ourselves in the middle of the road. We are the first to do it, so I feel like we're leading the way in it. And so I think we've already overcome those legal barriers. There's nothing that says that we can't ban certain products from our shelves. And I shouldn't say products, but we'll say certain ingredients
Additives.
from being in those foods right here in West Virginia. So again, my hope is that this is a national coalition, whether the FDA wants to act or not, that we can really push our manufacturers to try to drive healthiness across the nation.
Now, you brought up the stats that are, especially in West Virginia, the obesity rate, just the level of unhealthiness. I read somewhere that this is going to be the first generation where the kids don't outlive their parents in terms of life expectancy in the last 200 years. So the trend lines are bad.
Absolutely.
Is this just a precursor? What else comes down the line that you foresee that maybe are some things you want to tackle to make this more of a comprehensive health thing?
Well, I think we've got to look at everything from not just the food additives, but what additionally is being added to our processed foods. So let's continue down that trail as we move forward. What's in our water products that might be causing some health effects down the road. So I think there's many opportunities for us to continue to drive healthiness across West Virginia.
Now, it seems from a layman's term that, let's try to make things healthy, especially for our children, because as parents, we're the ones that are putting these things in their bodies.
Right.
They don't know what's going on. So when it comes to that, I mean, how do you make sure that we're doing what's best for everybody? Because there's going to be some blowback on this. There's going to be people that are hurt economically by this type of bill. What's been the feedback and what's been the pushback so far?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any economical barrier to it. Again, these are already being formulated all over the world. So your Fruit Loops in Europe taste just the same. They're the Fruit Loops brand. They're just a little discolored. Canada's already doing this. Australia's already doing it. So the products are already out there. I know what products are already available. There's a couple lines. Aldi's already carrying some of this. Target has a brand, I think it's called A&E's, that's already doing some of this. They are not higher priced. So we're not talking about putting a financial burden on families to go dye free. These products are already available. They're already cost efficient to do. There's also been some scrutiny about losing manufacturing jobs, and I just believe that's completely inaccurate. These products are going to continue to be made. Our shelves are going to continue to be full of the same products you see today. They're just going to be in a healthier product. And as well, we might even see an uptick in job creation if we're using organic materials to color with. So there might be an increased agricultural impact to this. So I don't think we just got to take the bait that it's just going to kill jobs and it's going to hurt us economically. I think it can be a great financial driver.
So if you think this is such a no-brainer, why hasn't it happened yet, and why is there pushback on it?
I think we're creatures of habit. And so what we've just always done is what we tend to always do. And I was willing to kind of stand up and say, hey, it's time to move in a different direction. And if you'll see, it just takes a little bit of leading and getting information out there. This bill passed 93 votes, I believe, in the House, 31 votes in the Senate. So, again, somebody I think just had to stand up and say, let's not do this anymore. And everybody's been willing to be supportive of it.
Now, the Senate did make some changes before passing it, so it's back in your hands now in the House. For the people that might not be following this bill closely, how has that changed? Have you had a chance to look at the new bill now as it's back in your hands, and are you happy with what's going on, or are there probably going to be some more debate about it?
Yeah, so all they did was move a date out to
27.
From 27 to 28. That was just some manufacturers were worried about being able to do that. I wasn't completely supportive of that change, but if that's what we've got to do to get moving in the right direction, I will support that. Many other states, as well as the FDA, has already banned some of these dyes. That takes effect in 27, so I felt like that was the appropriate date. But I wanted to be respectful of our manufacturers, giving them ample opportunity to do that. So they also added in some language, well, we did in the House prior to it passing, but it was actually Senator Barrett's approach was there was removing this year, starting August 1st, 25, from school lunches. So that will take effect, and fully supportive of that, not having those artificial dyes in our foods and school lunches.
We'll be talking to the Senator here in a little bit about that. So as we move forward now, do you foresee any problems in the House? You think this is going to get through? And beyond that, have you had a chance at all to talk to maybe people from neighboring states, legislators maybe from Ohio or Kentucky, because if the border states get on board, it seemed like it would be a lot easier to push this as something that isn't going to affect some of those border counties.
Yeah, I was really glad to see that this is getting some national recognition. We were mentioned on Fox News just the other day by us leading the way on it. So many other states have been reaching out. Many other states are looking at our legislation, doing a variety of it. So again, happy to work with those states, and hopefully we can do this nationwide.
All right, Delegate Burkhammer, appreciate your time today, sir.
Thank you, appreciate the time.
As he mentioned, Senator Barrett is also spearheading a lot of this in the Senate. We will talk to the senator coming up after this break as you're watching Outside the Echo Chamber from inside the state capitol. Stay tuned.
Are you ready to unlock a future filled with remarkable pay, unbeatable benefits, and unparalleled satisfaction? Imagine embarking on a journey that offers you a college-level education without the weight of debt, all while earning a steady income. Look no further than the West Virginia Building and Construction Trades Apprenticeship Programs. Join us, and together, let's build a future that's brighter and stronger. Go to actwv.org to apply today. The West Virginia Building and Construction Trades, where the future is forged.
Welcome back inside the state capitol as we continue this discussion on Outside the Echo Chamber. Joining me now to talk about the food diet bill from the Senate side of things is Senator Jason Barrett. Senator Barrett, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We spoke with Delegate Burkhammer, who introduced it into the House. It's now back in the hands of that body after coming through the Senate. You did make some changes to the bill after looking at it and discussing it. Talk a little bit about the debate that went on in your body and why those changes were made.
Well, actually, the changes that we made at the end on second reading, actually on third reading, we moved to amend on third reading, was to push the bill out a year as it relates to banning the dyes statewide.
Right.
And so it moves it from January 1 of 27 to January 1 of 28. And we had some pushback from the industry. There's some of our members that had some concern about that. And I thought that was a fair compromise to gain the support of our members and let them have some peace of mind over voting for the bill.
I don't think anybody would push back on trying to make especially our children healthier, or try to make the products that we consume healthy. But there is, as always with anything, there could be some things as you try to look around the corner that might not be great for everybody. And I know that Senator Tarr had brought up some concerns that he had with maybe the economic impact that this might have. Just talk a little bit about that and why you don't really see those same concerns.
Well, I think that we need to put the health of the West Virginians first. And I think in this bill we are absolutely doing that. Again, this bill, as it relates to banning these food dyes statewide, doesn't go into effect until January 1st of 2028. I think that gives ample time to the manufacturers of our food manufacturers that use synthetic food dyes to be able to get in compliance. These are the same food manufacturers that supply European countries with similar foods without those food dyes. So it absolutely can be done. There are a lot of manufacturers already moving to be dye-free. Right now there are over 20 state legislatures with bills pending that do a very similar thing that we're doing with banning these food dyes. I mentioned on the floor the Oklahoma bill that actually bans 21 different additives, not just synthetic food dyes. But we have a real opportunity here in West Virginia to be a leader on a health issue. And I think that we should absolutely seize this opportunity. We are patiently and growing impatiently waiting on the House to concur with our message. That, in my view, should have been done for the past couple days. I'm being told that's going to be done tomorrow. And frankly, I'm really looking forward to Governor Morrissey being the first governor to sign a synthetic food dyes ban for West Virginia to be a leader and to bring great attention to the state of West Virginia on a health issue. And I think Governor Morrissey should absolutely take that opportunity to do that.
I know the AFL-CIO doesn't like this bill as it's written right now, and we're going to have someone from that group on Thursday. We tried to get them on today, but schedules were conflicting. A lot of their concerns were what it might do to smaller businesses, like if you own a restaurant on a border county, you can no longer sell Mountain Dew. Is that going to hurt your business? Is it challenging, no matter what the issue is, when you limit or restrict or ban something that isn't banned in a state right across the border, that could have a blowback economically on those small businesses?
Well, and I think, again, with that 2028 date, I think that we're going to see several states follow suit of West Virginia. I think it's going to be a domino effect, and we're going to be the leader. If you look at Mountain Dew in the UK, doesn't have synthetic food dyes. It doesn't have colors in it. It's colored by beta carotene.
So you can still have the same products,
right.
They would just have to be made differently.
That's right. But in the United States, Mountain Dew is colored with yellow number 5.
Right.
So I think that's what's important to understand. And it's shocking to me, frankly, that the AFL-CIO is opposed to that. That is the first I've heard of that. They're here every year asking for bills that they believe increase workplace safety. They're critical of the legislature anytime that we pass a bill that they think creates a workplace safety issue, but they don't want to be on the right side of banning a synthetic food dye that has been proven to be harmful to children and adults.
This is pretty far-reaching. It's a comprehensive ban on basically 99% of the food dyes that you see in processed foods and in foods that have those additives in them. And a lot of foods that people might not even realize, like red dye 40s and a lot of ketchups. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's going to be a drastic effect on what we consume.
Well, and again, if it's good enough for Europe, if the children in Europe deserve healthy food without synthetic food dyes, why don't the children in West Virginia and all across this country deserve the same quality of food? And that's my question that no one in the industry has given me an answer to.
Now, there have been studies done, and it does look like most of the studies that have good methodology behind them show that there's very limited, if any, nutritional value to these additives. They're strictly in place mm-hmm. to present a better look,
to
really,
look pretty.
Optics.
Yep.
So when that comes into play, the question becomes, why hasn't this happened before? What's happening on a federal level, maybe with the FDA, that hasn't led to this earlier?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it just comes from influence from big food. I think that's where it comes from. But I think that we're starting to see a real movement, a grassroots movement across this country, I think largely led by Secretary Kennedy, who is part of the MAHA movement, and I think that we're seeing families, especially moms across this country, start to really pay attention to the foods that their children are consuming. And so I think it's very grassroots, and I think that's why you've seen 20 state legislatures now introduce legislation. They're moving through committees. So again, this is going to be a domino effect, and West Virginia is going to be at the forefront.
You mentioned MAHA, that's Make America Healthy Again, the offshoot of the Make America Great Again slogan from the president. There's no doubt that the stats in West Virginia are troubling. The obesity rate, the amount of people that are on prescription drugs. I mentioned with Delegate Burkhammer that I read an article that said this will be the first generation where we don't outlive our parents in terms of life expectancy mm-hmm. going down for the first time in 200 years. How did we get here? And is it going to take something like this, a small step forward, to make a drastic movement?
Yeah, and that is a very staggering statistic, that in 200 years, this is the first generation not going to live long as their parents. And I think that should be a wake-up call to not only us here in West Virginia, but all across the country. And it largely comes to the things that we put in our bodies, the things that we eat. I think that folks aren't as active as they have been in the past, or they should be. And this is a necessary first step to, again, improving the health of the people of West Virginia.
Now, you said that you're confident that it will get through and that it will get signed by the governor. I know he listens closely to Americans for Prosperity. They also had some economic concerns, and a lot of the stances that they take rest on personal choice and not being able to police behaviors. So there might be some blowback there, but are you confident as we sit here today that this will get through and it will get signed?
I think so. From what I understand, I'm optimistic that the House will concur with the Senate amendment tomorrow. And get the bill down to the governor's desk very soon. And I think it's absolutely the right thing for Governor Morrissey to sign the bill. I think it absolutely sends the right message, not only to the people of West Virginia, but to the people of the country and to legislators all over the country to see that if it can be done here, it can be done in their state.
And I'll let you out of here on this. Is this a precursor of what's to come? Do you see anything maybe originating in the Senate that will follow up on this and maybe make it even more widespread?
As far as it relates to banning additional additives, I don't foresee that this session. I think that we are, at the forefront. We're being a leader on this issue, but we also do have to be mindful of the industry. And I think that we are with this bill. Again, these are things that are banned in a lot of European countries. So I think this is a necessary first step. We've taken consideration concerns from manufacturers, but again, other states, they have bills that go much further than West Virginia's bill does, specifically Oklahoma.
All right, Senator Barrett, thank you so much for your time,
Thanks,
sir.
Rick.
We appreciate it. And don't go anywhere, because coming up, we'll talk to pollster Mark Blankenship to get his status report on the first half of the session here under the Gold Dome as Outside the Echo Chamber continues.
CJU is a great company to work for. We've been around for 78 years. We are an underground utility construction company all across the East Coast. We are rapidly growing, and we're seeing a huge growth in this market, a huge need for employees. We are always looking for those that are experienced, those that are trying to get their foot in the door. We have positions for everybody. We offer competitive pay. We offer competitive benefits. We take pride in having a family atmosphere at CJU's, and it's truly just a family company.
Welcome back inside the state capitol and this outside the echo chamber. We're going to switch things up a little bit as we approach the halfway point of session. Joining us now is pollster Mark Blankenship to talk a little bit about what's going on under the Gold Dome and what your numbers are showing. I know, Mark, we talk a lot about why people vote the way they do, and in this last election, the number one concern seemed to be the economy. And we still have a lot of people looking at this session saying, okay, where are these revenue bills? What's going on? And I know a lot of it is intertwined with what we see federally, but at the state level here in Charleston, at the Capitol, what have you seen from people that you're talking to about what they want to see happen and what is happening?
Well, there's no question, you're exactly right, that the number one voter issue or concern in 2024, in 2022, in 2020, in 2018, were economic development and job creation. And it's not even close. And that's among Democrats, it's among Republicans, it's among independents. It is the singular most important issue to voters in West Virginia. So obviously they want, when they elect these folks, they want them to come here and address those issues, right? And so that's how the voters will be judging the success or failure of the legislative session, is what do you do to create jobs? What do you do to improve our economy in West Virginia? And if they do a good job or a perceived good job, they'll be rewarded at the polls the next time around.
But it's tough, right? Because it's a challenge. A lot of these things, to fix them, takes spending money, and spending obviously is half of the equation when you're talking about trying to get the balance. So, I mean, for instance, PEIA, it seems like that comes up every year, and we still haven't found a permanent fix. We're just putting Band-Aids and paper clips on it year after year. But to really do it right would take a fundamental investment, and that's a big chunk of change.
And I've polled the issue of PEIA before, and I think that in part what voters want to see is the same thing that's going on in the macro healthcare market, right? They want state employees and government employees to have good health care and good health insurance, but they also want them to at least, the premiums to be in line or close to be in line with that of the rest of society, right? It can't be as cheap as it was in the 1980s, but it also shouldn't be so expensive that it makes it unaffordable to come to work for government.
And some of these things that we have seen take place over the Justice Administration relies on not necessarily hope, but unknowns. When you're talking about drastic tax cuts, behind that, the theory is, well, if you put more money back in people's pockets, it sparks the economy. It does create job creation, which expands the base. So while there might be some short-term revenue loss over time, that's made up by more people working, more people pitching into the pool, so to speak.
And I think Governor Morrissey's first address to the joint session here at the legislature touched upon that. I think he's very cognizant of that, meaning that the fixes to the economy are long-term and that they're not going to happen overnight. They're going to take a while to get there. And I think that that's something that resonates with voters, but I think, also voters in West Virginia have been waiting a long time for it anyway.
Is that a tough sell, though? Because, I mean, look at what's happening. You talked about the macro vision, the 30,000 feet in the air view. And what we see right now federally, it's been a rough couple weeks for the stock market with the tariffs that are in place and with the uncertainty about what's happening with the president's decisions. President Trump will say, well, this is short-term pain for long-term gain. There's going to be a little bit of a dip, but we have to do that to correct this and get it right. It's tough to sell that to people, though, and especially people that might be near retirement. They're looking at their 401k saying, when is this going to end? We're down 15%.
I hear it all the time in focus groups. I hear it all the time, I see it all the time in polling data that we have. Voters understand. Here's what they don't want. Let's start there.
Sure.
They don't want things as usual, because as usual has gotten them to the point. I've been polling in West Virginia and doing voter opinion polls for 25 years. And the number one issue is always jobs in the economy. So for at least for 25 years, they've been screaming out, we want a better economy, we want more jobs in this state, right? So what they don't want is just kicking the can down the road and continuing as usual, because that hasn't worked.
Yeah.
So they are willing, there's a certain willingness among voters to say, okay, if we're going to try something different, let's try it. And if it takes a year, if it takes a year and a half, but eventually we want to see the results. And if we don't, we will judge you at the next election. And they're very cognizant of that. I think oftentimes people don't give voters anywhere, but much less West Virginia, enough credit. They pay attention to these issues. But I always refer, everybody always talks about the economy. It's the economy is stupid. I take it a step further. It's the household economy.
Yeah.
So voters don't,
dinner table
sure,
politics.
they don't look at, they know what GDP is, and they understand the stock market, and they understand all of that. But at the end of the day, they understand the economics of their household best, because that's what matters.
Sure.
And so that's what they're paying attention to. Are things getting better for me and for my family? And right now, the answer to that question is no, because we've asked it very recently, which I'll have some polling coming out publicly in the next couple of weeks. They don't believe that things have gotten better. The overwhelming majority say that their lives have either remained the same or gotten worse. Very few people say it's gotten better.
And on a national level, they blame the administration in Washington, right? Whether you're Republican or Democrat. But locally, on a state level, it's been now since really 2014 that the Republicans made that huge flip. So it's been more than a decade.
Yeah.
So at what point do you see it maybe, the numbers are startling, what we have now with the Republican-Democrat splits in both bodies. Do you see that maybe evening out over time? I mean, I know politics can be cyclical, and what we saw just as recently as 20 years ago is completely the opposite of what we see right now.
There's certainly the ability. Okay, so when I first started here, and Rick, you were around back then too, the West Virginia State Senate had one Republican.
Right.
The House of Delegates had 20,
Handful.
15 Republicans, something like that, and no constitutional officer was a Republican. Today, that's flipped, and that's been, in a 20-year span. So I know that seems like a long time, but in the arc of West Virginia history, it's not that long. So could it flip back? I mean, it could. I think what you're going to see is some, like Democrats had in the late 80s, early 90s, all the way through some of the 2000s, you're going to see some real primary fights in the Republican Party about who, because the factions now move from between Democrat and Republican
to infighting
in the Republicans, and you're going to see some real battles, I think, in those primaries for everything from state Senate to mayor to county commissioner. You're going to see some Republican battles.
It seems like everything has gone, the Overton window has skewed so much. You've got basically fringes now on both sides that are yelling and getting what they want. Do you see a movement more toward the middle? Does that have to happen, or do you think? It almost seems like everything's getting so polarized.
I mean, look. The plurality of West Virginians still define themselves as conservative, whether that is a Democrat or an independent or a Republican. It's about 44% of all West Virginians say, when you ask them, are you conservative, moderate, or liberal? Conservative, 44%. Moderates, somewhere, I think it's about 30%, and then the liberal is 17%. So, I think that rather than saying the middle is where you go, you govern to the majority, right? You govern and you politic to the majority. It's basic political science, right? If you're running a campaign, what do you do to win? You appeal to the majority, right? And I think you have to appeal to the majority when you govern too, because while it's not the same, government politics is not the same, it is ostensibly.
But isn't it also important to be cognizant of the minority and of the opposing voices, because those people exist in West Virginia too, and they deserve a voice.
It is, and I think you see that in some areas where something might not be necessarily hugely popular, and the legislature takes it up because it's needed. Right? It may not affect 51% or more of the state. It may affect only 10%, but it's necessary, and so you'll see. Legislators do that kind of thing, and I think it's smart. You have to, that's our framers of the U.S. Constitution talked about it. You have to listen to the minority, but you have to govern to the majority, right?
Right. And Do you see that happening though? When you have the numbers that, I mean, there's only, as you mentioned, one, you know, I think there's 2 Democrats now in the Senate. It's 30 to 2. And then there's only, I mean, you could fit them in a minivan over here in the House.
I used to say when I started this, we Republican, in full disclosure, I am a Republican and have always been. We used to be able to have our meetings in a phone booth.
Right.
And that's where the Democrats...
Is that healthy? Those kind of numbers.
I don't know. That's a good question. It depends on how effective it is. And I think, you know, Governor Morrissey is working hard to build consensus among, you know, the 30 Republicans over here and the 90 or 90 plus Republicans over in the House of Delegates. So I think it in large part depends on how effectively they can be led and the cohesion. Because look, you don't need all 90 Republicans to pass a bill. You need 51. You don't need all 30 Republicans over here to pass a bill. You need 17 or whatever it is. You know, you need a simple majority. So the question, is it healthy? I don't know if it's healthy. I don't know if it's any healthier than when you have a 50-50 split. I don't know that that's necessarily healthy because government becomes stagnant. Then you look at the U.S. Congress right now, it's hard for them to get anything done at all because the majorities are so slim. You know, so if 2 or 3 Republicans say, I'm not going to vote for that, then it fails.
And there's a lot of gamesmanship, especially on the federal level. I mean, you brought up, you know, we started this conversation talking about revenue and budget and what's going on right now federally with the CR, the continuing resolution to try to not shut down the government. When the Republicans are in charge, it's always the Democrats' fault that the shutdown. When the Democrats are in charge, it's the Republicans' fault that we're threatening a shutdown.
But voters are, I don't mean to interrupt you, but voters are cognizant and concerned about the debt to the debt that the United States is in.
Sure.
And they pay attention to it. And on the flip side of that, you know, you have to balance that, and I think Senator Capito and Justice are probably dealing with that right now, is how do you balance a balanced budget or a reduced federal debt with some of those programs, like Medicaid.
You can't be
Medicare,
reckless because you have to spend something. You can't just cut all spending because then the whole thing crumbles. So that's the tricky part.
Right.
And bringing it back to the state level, are you confident over the second half of the session that we will start seeing some of these revenue and budget bills get some traction?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think, look, in most legislative sessions, you know, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and Governor Morrissey and Secretary Eric Nelson, who's from Kanawha County, you know, they're smart guys, and behind the scenes they're putting together budgets and spending programs that work, that make sense, and there's still time left. And so I don't think any governor ever comes hard charging in at the beginning and says, this is my budget, this is what you have to do right now. You know, I think there's a lot of talks going on, and I think knowing that he's knowing the kind of conservative and fiscal conservative that Governor Morrissey is, I think that in the next 30 days you're going to see a budget that reflects that and reflects the majority, as we said earlier, the majority opinion in the state of West Virginia.
All right, well, we will see. We thank you for your time, as
Thank
always,
you.
sir. Mark Blankenship, appreciate his time today. We also want to thank our other guests today, Senator Jason Barrett and Delegate Adam Burkhammer. And, of course, thank you for joining us on this episode of Outside the Echo Chamber. We'll be back on Thursday with another show as we continue to discuss the topics that are important to you and your family. Until then, I'm Rick Lord. Take care.